Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the key in the lock. The old Victorian house loomed before her, its weathered facade a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of her former suburban life. This was it, her fresh start, her escape from the shattered remains of a 5-year relationship that had crumbled like sand through her fingers. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty foyer. Sarah stepped inside, dragging her suitcase behind her. The floorboards groaned under her weight, as if protesting this intrusion after years of solitude. She fumbled for a light switch, and a dim bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the faded wallpaper. "Home sweet home," Sarah muttered, her voice echoing in the empty space. She had found the house online a steal, really. The real estate agent had been suspiciously eager to offload the property, rambling about motivated sellers and unique charm. Now, standing in the musty entrance hall, Sarah understood why. The place reeked of neglect and secrets. But it was hers, and more importantly it was far away from Jason and the pitying looks of their mutual friends. Here in this small town miles from the city, she could lick her wounds in peace. Sarah dragged her suitcase up the creaking stairs, wincing at every squeak and groan of the old wood. The second floor was a maze of closed doors and dim corridors. She chose a bedroom at random, pushing open a door to reveal a spacious room with a large bay window overlooking the overgrown backyard. As she unpacked, Sarah's mind wandered to the events that had led her here. Jason's betrayal, the screaming matches, the quiet desperation as they tried to salvage something irreparably broken. In the end, it had been easier to run, to start over completely. A chill ran down her spine and Sarah rubbed her arms, glancing at the window. Had it always been that cold in here? She made a mental note to check the heating system in the morning. As night fell, Sarah found herself restless. The house seemed to come alive in the darkness, every creak and settling noise amplified in the silence. She wandered downstairs, thinking a cup of tea might calm her nerves. In the kitchen, Sarah rummaged through boxes until she found her kettle. As she waited for the water to boil, her gaze fell on a small door in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of moving boxes. Curious, she pushed the boxes aside and tugged on the handle. It was locked. Odd, Sarah murmured. She made a mental note to ask the real estate agent about it. The kettle's whistle pierced the silence, making Sarah jump. She poured her tea with shaking hands, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over her. It was just nerves, she told herself. New house jitters. Back in her bedroom, Sarah sipped her tea and stared out the window at the moonlit yard. The trees cast strange, shifting shadows on the overgrown grass. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw something move among them, a darker patch of shadow, slithering between the trunks. She blinked, and it was gone. "Get a grip, Sarah," she muttered, turning away from the window. Her eyes fell on a cardboard box labeled photos and her heart clenched. Against her better judgment, she opened it. On top was a framed picture of her and Jason, taken on their last vacation together. They were smiling, his arm around her waist, the sunset painting them in warm hues. Sarah's throat tightened. How could something that looked so perfect have been so rotten underneath? She was about to close the box when something caught her eye. Tucked in the corner was an old, sepia-toned photograph she didn't recognize. Sarah pulled it out, frowning. It showed this very house, but decades ago, when the paint was fresh and the garden well tended. And there, in an upstairs window, Sarah's breath caught. A woman's face, pale and drawn, staring out with an expression of utter despair. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window, making Sarah gasp. The photograph slipped from her fingers, falling face down on the floor. Sarah woke with a start, her heart pounding. The unfamiliar shadows of her new bedroom loomed around her, and for a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back: the move, the house, the escape from her old life. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Sunlight streamed through the dusty curtains, painting patterns on the worn hardwood floor. Sarah's gaze fell on the photograph she'd found last night, still face down where it had fallen. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. In the harsh light of day, the woman's face in the window seemed even more haunting. Sarah studied it, a chill running down her spine. Who was she? And why did she look so trapped? "Get it together," Sarah muttered to herself. "It's just an old photo. This house is probably full of junk left behind by previous owners." But as she got dressed and made her way downstairs, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of her eye, seemed to hold a sinister presence. In the kitchen, Sarah fumbled with the ancient coffee maker, her mind racing. "Okay, Sarah, game plan," she said aloud, finding comfort in the sound of her own voice in the empty house. "Unpack the essentials, clean this place up, and maybe see if there's a hardware store in town. This house needs some serious TLC." As the coffee brewed, Sarah's thoughts drifted to Jason. What was he doing right now? Had he even noticed she was gone? She imagined him waking up next to that woman. What was her name? Melissa? Melanie, and felt a surge of anger and hurt. "Stop it," she hissed, gripping the edge of the counter. "He doesn't matter anymore. This is your fresh start, remember? The coffee maker sputtered to a stop, and Sarah poured herself a cup, inhaling the familiar aroma. As she sipped, she gazed out the kitchen window at the overgrown backyard. In the daylight, it looked less sinister, more sad and neglected. Like me, Sarah thought wryly. Something caught her eye, a flash of movement near the tree line. Sarah leaned closer to the window, squinting. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw a figure standing there, watching the house. But when she blinked, it was gone. Great, now I'm seeing things, Sarah muttered. Maybe I should have sprung for therapy instead of a creepy old house. Determined to shake off her unease, Sarah threw herself into unpacking. She tackled the living room first, arranging her furniture and hanging pictures on the walls. As she worked, she found herself talking aloud, filling the silence with her thoughts. You know, this place isn't so bad, she said, stepping back to admire a freshly hung mirror. A little paint, some new curtains, it could be really nice. But even as she spoke, Sarah couldn't ignore the way the house seemed to resist her efforts. Picture frames wouldn't hang straight, no matter how many times she adjusted them. The mirror kept sliding to one side, as if pushed by an unseen hand. By mid-afternoon, Sarah was sweaty, dusty, and increasingly frustrated. She decided to take a break and explore the rest of the house. The second floor held more bedrooms than she'd ever need, each one filled with shadows and whispers of the past. At the end of the hall, Sarah found a narrow staircase leading up. An attic, she mused, her curiosity piqued. I don't remember the real estate agent mentioning that. The stairs creaked ominously as Sarah ascended. At the top, she found herself in a large, open space with sloped ceilings and small, round windows. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight, and the air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the contents of the attic. It was packed with furniture, boxes, and what looked like antiques, all draped in sheets that had long since gathered a thick layer of dust. Well, this is unexpected, Sarah said, her voice hushed. She moved deeper into the space, running. Sarah's fingers trembled as she traced the faded symbols etched into the floorboards of the attic. The dim light from her phone cast eerie shadows across the dusty space, making the strange markings seem to writhe and shift. She swallowed hard, her throat dry with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. What the hell were they doing up here, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The past week had been a blur of unsettling discoveries. First, the locked door in the kitchen that refused to budge. Then, the whispers in the night that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. And now this an attic full of occult paraphernalia and cryptic symbols that sent chills down her spine. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the house's dark history. The elderly neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, had hinted at a tragedy decades ago, her rheumy eyes clouding with fear as she spoke of those poor souls and the darkness that never left. At the time, Sarah had dismissed it as the ramblings of a lonely old woman. Now, she wasn't so sure. A sudden creak from the floorboards behind her made Sarah whirl around, her heart leaping into her throat. The attic was empty, the shadows still and silent. But the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes boring into her, intensified. Get a grip, Sarah, she chided herself. You're letting your imagination run wild. But even as she tried to rationalize her fears, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that there was more to this house than met the eye. The constant chill in the air, the way shadows seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them, the faint whispers that haunted her dreams, it all added up to something she didn't want to name. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. She had come up here for a reason, determined to uncover the truth about the house's past. Whatever had happened here, whatever dark secrets these walls held, she would drag them into the light. Her gaze fell on a dusty trunk tucked away in the corner. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid, coughing as a cloud of dust billowed up. Inside, she found a collection of old journals, their leather covers cracked and faded with age. Sarah picked up the topmost journal, her curiosity overriding her apprehension. As she opened it, a slip of paper fluttered to the floor. She bent to retrieve it, her blood running cold as she realized it was a photograph, the same one she had found in her moving boxes, showing the woman's anguished face in the window. What the Sarah's words died in her throat as she turned the photo over. On the back, in spidery handwriting, was a name and date: Elizabeth Blackwood, 1923. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She had assumed the photo had been mixed in with her own belongings by mistake. But if it was here in this trunk? Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by a loud thump from downstairs. She froze, straining her ears. For a moment, all was silent. Then came another thump, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Oh God, someone's in the house, Sarah thought, panic rising in her chest. She looked around wildly, searching for a weapon, anything she could use to defend herself. Her eyes fell on an old candlestick, its brass tarnished with age. She grabbed it, its weight oddly comforting in her hand. The footsteps grew louder, coming up the stairs. Sarah's heart raced, her palms sweaty against the cool metal of the candlestick. She positioned herself behind the attic door, ready to strike if necessary. The door creaked open slowly. Sarah held her breath, muscles tensed for action. A figure stepped into the attic, and without thinking, Sarah swung the candlestick. Ow, what the hell? The familiar voice made Sarah stop mid-swing. She blinked in confusion as the lights flickered on, revealing her best friend, Megan, rubbing her arm where the candlestick had grazed her. Sarah's heart raced as she lowered the candlestick, relief and embarrassment washing over her in equal measure. Megan, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were. Megan raised an eyebrow, rubbing her arm where the candlestick had struck. You thought I was what? A burglar? A ghost? She glanced around the attic, taking in the dusty relics and occult symbols. Though I guess I can't blame you, given the creepy vibes this place is giving off. Sarah sank to the floor, her legs suddenly weak. I don't know what I thought. It's just, there's something wrong with this house, Meg. I can feel it. Megan crouched beside her, concern etched on her face. What do you mean? What's been happening? As Sarah recounted the strange occurrences of the past week, the whispers, the moving shadows, the locked door, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She hadn't realized how much she needed to confide in someone, to have her fears validated by another person. And then there's this, Sarah finished, holding out the photograph of Elizabeth Blackwood. I found it in my moving boxes, but then I found the same photo up here in this trunk. It's like the house wanted me to find it. Megan examined the photo, her brow furrowed. Okay, that is weird. But Sarah, are you sure you're not just, projecting? After everything with Jake. This has nothing to do with Jake, Sarah snapped, more harshly than she intended. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I'm sorry. It's just, I know how it sounds. But I swear, Meg, something is happening here. Something dark. You're not crazy, Sarah told herself firmly. You know what you've seen, what you've felt. This is real. Megan was silent for a moment, her eyes roaming over the attic's contents. All right, she said finally. I believe you. Or at least, I believe that you believe it. So what do you want to do? Sarah stood up, a newfound determination coursing through her. I want to find out what happened here. Who Elizabeth Blackwood was and why her spirit seems to be trapped in this house. As they descended from the attic, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking in the corners. But there was nothing, just the usual darkness and dust. In the kitchen, Sarah put on a pot of coffee while Megan flipped through one of the journals they'd brought down from the attic. The normalcy of the scene, two friends sharing coffee and conversation, felt surreal after the tension of the attic. Listen to this, Megan said, her finger tracing a line in the journal. The circle grows stronger with each passing night. Soon we will have the power to pierce the veil and bring forth that which lies beyond. Creepy stuff, Sarah. Looks like your house used to be home to some kind of occult group. Sarah shivered, wrapping her hands around her warm mug. But what were they trying to do? And what happened to them? Before Megan could respond, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Both women jumped, coffee sloshing over the rims of their mugs. What was that? Megan whispered, her eyes wide. Sarah set down her mug, her heart pounding. I don't know. It came from my bedroom, I think. They crept up the stairs, Sarah leading the way with Megan close behind. The hallway seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper and more menacing. As they approached Sarah's bedroom, the temperature dropped noticeably, their breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. Sarah pushed open the door, flicking on the light switch. Nothing happened. The room remained shrouded in darkness. This is it, Sarah thought, a mixture of fear and anticipation coursing through her. Whatever's been haunting this house, we're about to face it. She fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam. Sarah's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing her bedroom in sharp relief. The window was open, curtains billowing in a breeze that hadn't been there moments ago. Shards of glass littered the floor beneath it, glinting in the harsh light. What the hell? Megan whispered, peering around Sarah's shoulder. Sarah stepped into the room, glass crunching under her feet. Her eyes darted from corner to corner, searching for any sign of an intruder. But the room was empty, at least of any living presence. This is more than just an old house settling, Sarah thought, her heart racing. Something wants our attention. As if in response to her thoughts, a cold breeze swept through the room, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a voice. Sarah couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakably urgent, pleading. Did you hear that? She asked Megan, her voice barely above a whisper. Megan nodded, her face pale in the flashlight's glow. I think it was saying help me. Sarah's mind raced, connecting the dots between the strange occurrences, the old photograph, and the journals they'd found in the attic. Elizabeth, she murmured. It must be Elizabeth Blackwood. As if summoned by the name, the temperature in the room plummeted further. Sarah's breath came out in visible puffs, and goosebumps erupted along her arms. The flashlight flickered, its beam weakening. No, 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 Sarah thought frantically. Don't go out now. But the light continued to dim, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. And in those shadows, Sarah saw movement. At first, it was subtle, a slight shifting, as if the darkness itself was alive. But as Sarah watched, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, the shadows began to coalesce into a vaguely human shape. "Sarah," Megan's voice quavered. "We should go, now." But Sarah couldn't move. She was transfixed by the figure forming before her. It was a woman, her features indistinct but her posture one of desperation. She reached out towards Sarah with wispy, insubstantial hands. And then, as clearly as if someone was standing right next to her, Sarah heard a voice. "Please help me." The flashlight gave one last, feeble flicker and went out, plunging the room into total darkness. Sarah heard Megan's sharp intake of breath, felt her friend's hand clutch at her arm. "Sarah, we need to." But before Megan could finish, a blinding light filled the room. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut against the sudden glare, raising her arm to shield her face. When she lowered it, blinking away the after images, she found herself alone in the bedroom. Megan was gone. The broken glass had vanished. And standing before her, as solid and real as any living person, was Elizabeth Blackwood. Sarah's mind reeled, struggling to process what she was seeing. Elizabeth looked exactly as she had in the photograph, pale skin, dark hair piled atop her head, dressed in a high-necked Victorian gown. But her eyes were filled with an otherworldly light, a swirling mix of fear and determination. "You can see me," Elizabeth said, her voice tinged with wonder. "After all this time, someone can finally see me." Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice. A part of her was screaming that this couldn't be real, that she must be dreaming or hallucinating. But a deeper part, the part that had felt the wrongness in this house from the moment she arrived, knew that this was all too real. "I'm talking to a ghost," Sarah thought, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. "I'm actually talking to a ghost." "Where's Megan?" she managed to ask, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. "What happened to her?" Elizabeth's face fell. "Your friend is safe, for now, but time is running short. The veil between worlds is thinning, and if we don't act quickly..." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process Elizabeth's words. The veil between worlds? Time running short? It was all too much, too fast. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and forced herself to focus. "One thing at a time," she thought. "Start with what you know." "Okay," Sarah said, opening her eyes to meet Elizabeth's ethereal gaze. "You said Megan is safe for now. What does that mean? Where is she?" Elizabeth's form flickered, like a candle flame in a draft. "Your friend has been pulled into the shadow realm, a place between your world and the next. It's where I've been trapped for over a century." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "And how do we get her back?" "We must complete the ritual," Elizabeth said, her voice urgent. "The same ritual that trapped me here, but in reverse. It's the only way to set things right and save your friend." Sarah's head spun with questions, but she forced herself to stay focused. "What do we need to do?" As Elizabeth began to explain, Sarah's mind drifted back to the moment she first stepped into this house. She had been so focused on escaping her past, on running from the pain of her breakup, that she'd ignored all the warning signs. The unease she'd felt, the strange occurrences, they had all been trying to tell her something. "I should have listened," Sarah thought. "I should have trusted my instincts." But there was no time for regrets now. Megan needed her, and somehow, impossibly, so did this ghost from the past. Elizabeth's voice brought Sarah back to the present. "The ritual requires 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. We must gather objects representing each and place them at specific points in the house." Sarah nodded, trying to commit every detail to memory. "And then what?" "Then we must recite the incantation," Elizabeth said, her form growing fainter. "But be warned, the shadows will try to stop us. They feed on the energy of the living, and they won't give up their prey easily." As if on cue, a low, menacing growl echoed through the house. Sarah's heart raced, but she steeled herself. "I won't let fear paralyze me," she thought. "Not when Megan's life is at stake." "Tell me what we need," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. Elizabeth smiled, a ghostly expression of pride and hope. "For earth, we need soil from the garden. For air, a feather. For fire, a candle. For water, a vial of rainwater. And for spirit..." Her voice trailed off, her eyes growing distant. "What?" Sarah prompted. "What do we need for spirit?" Elizabeth's gaze refocused on Sarah. "For spirit, we need a personal object, something with strong emotional ties. It must be freely given, a sacrifice of sorts." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her neck, where a delicate silver locket hung. Inside was a photo of her and her ex, taken in happier times. She had kept it as a reminder, a talisman against making the same mistakes again. But now, sometimes moving forward means letting go, Sarah thought, unclasping the necklace. "Will this work?" Elizabeth nodded, her eyes shining with ghostly tears. "Yes, that will do perfectly. Now we must hurry. The shadows grow stronger with each passing moment." Sarah set off through the house, gathering the items they needed. As she moved from room to room, she could feel the oppressive weight of unseen eyes upon her. Shadows seemed to writhe in the corners of her vision, always disappearing when she turned to look directly at them. Stay focused, she told herself. Don't let them distract you. As she collected the soil from the overgrown garden, Sarah couldn't help but think of Megan. Where was she now? Was she scared? In pain? The thought of her friend trapped in some otherworldly realm made Sarah's chest tighten with fear and guilt. I'm coming, Megan, she thought fiercely. Just hold on a little longer. Back inside, Sarah found a feather that. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she placed the final item, her silver locket, in its designated spot. The 5 elements formed a pentagram on the living room floor, each object glowing with an otherworldly light. Elizabeth's spectral form hovered nearby, her eyes fixed on the makeshift altar. This is it, Sarah thought, a mixture of fear and determination coursing through her veins. No turning back now. Are you ready? Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, swallowing hard. What do I need to do? Stand in the center of the pentagram, Elizabeth instructed. I'll recite the incantation. When I give the signal, you must focus all your energy on bringing Megan back. Visualize her, call to her with your mind and heart. Your connection will be the tether that guides her home. As Sarah stepped into the center of the glowing symbols, she couldn't help but reflect on how surreal this all was. Just days ago, her biggest worry had been unpacking boxes and trying to forget her ex. Now, she was about to perform an occult ritual with a ghost to save her best friend from shadow monsters. Life really does have a way of throwing curveballs, she thought wryly. Elizabeth began to chant in a language Sarah didn't recognize. The words seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with power. The objects at the points of the pentagram began to pulse with light, growing brighter with each syllable. Suddenly, the shadows in the room came alive. They writhed and twisted, taking on monstrous shapes that lunged at Sarah. She flinched, but the pentagram's light held them at bay for now. Don't break the circle. Elizabeth's voice cut through the chaos. Focus on Megan. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to block out the terrifying sights and sounds around her. She thought of Megan, her laugh, her smile, the way she always knew just what to say to cheer Sarah up. She remembered all the times Megan had been there for her, through breakups and bad days and everything in between. Come back to me, Megan, Sarah pleaded silently. I need you, please. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing in on Sarah from all sides. She could hear the shadows shrieking, feel their cold tendrils trying to reach her. But she held firm, focusing all her energy on her friend. In her mind's eye, Sarah saw a glimmer of light in the darkness. It grew brighter, taking on a familiar shape. Megan, I see her. Sarah cried out, her eyes still squeezed shut. Megan, I'm here. Follow my voice. The pressure in the room intensified. Sarah felt as if she were being crushed, torn apart, unmade. But still, she held on, reaching out with every fiber of her being towards that distant light. Sarah? Megan's voice, faint but unmistakable, cut through the chaos. Sarah's eyes flew open. There, in the center of the pentagram with her, stood Megan, translucent and flickering, but undeniably there. Megan. Sarah reached out, but her hand passed right through her friend's form. The ritual isn't complete, Elizabeth warned. We must banish the shadows once and for all, or they'll drag her back. As if in response, the shadows surged forward with renewed fury. The pentagram's light flickered, threatening to fail under the onslaught. What do we do? Sarah cried, desperation clawing at her throat. Elizabeth's form began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with the pentagram. We end this. Together. The ghost's light expanded, enveloping Sarah and Megan's spectral form. In that moment, Sarah felt a connection to both of them, to Megan's warmth and loyalty, to Elizabeth's centuries of pain and determination. Their energies intertwined, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. Sarah felt words rising unbidden to her lips, an incantation she somehow knew by heart. As she spoke, her voice blended with Elizabeth's and Megan's, the three of them chanting in perfect unison. The blinding light faded, and Sarah found herself on her knees in the center of the now dormant pentagram. Her body ached, every muscle screaming in protest as she tried to move. The living room was eerily quiet, the oppressive presence of the shadows gone. Did it work? Sarah thought, her mind foggy with exhaustion. Is it over? She blinked, trying to clear her vision. As the world came back into focus, she saw a figure lying motionless on the floor beside her. Megan. Sarah crawled over to her friend, heart pounding. She reached out with trembling hands, half expecting them to pass right through. But this time, her fingers met solid flesh. Megan, can you hear me? Megan's eyes fluttered open, confusion evident in her gaze. Sarah? What? Where am I? Relief washed over Sarah like a tidal wave. She pulled Megan into a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. You're home, she whispered. You're safe now. As Megan slowly sat up, looking around in bewilderment, Sarah scanned the room for any sign of Elizabeth. The ghost was nowhere to be seen. She's gone, Sarah realized with a pang of sadness. She must have used the last of her energy to help us. Sarah, what happened? Megan asked, her voice hoarse. The last thing I remember is being in your bedroom, and then, darkness. Cold. I was so lost. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to figure out how to explain everything. It's a long story, she said finally, but the short version is this house was haunted, you got taken by shadow monsters, and we just performed an occult ritual to bring you back and banish the evil. Megan stared at her for a long moment before letting out a weak laugh. Okay, either I'm still dreaming, or we've got a lot to talk about. Sarah couldn't help but chuckle, the absurdity of the situation finally hitting her. Trust me, I'm still having trouble believing it myself. As the adrenaline began to wear off, exhaustion settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. She helped Megan to her feet, and they made their way to the kitchen on shaky legs. Sarah put on a pot of coffee, knowing they both needed the caffeine boost. While the coffee brewed, Sarah filled Megan in on everything that had happened to Elizabeth's ghost, the house's dark history, and the ritual they had performed. Megan listened with wide eyes, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. So, let me get this straight, Megan said as Sarah finished her tale. You moved into a haunted house, befriended a ghost, and then performed an exorcism to save me from shadow demons? Sarah nodded, a wry smile on her face. Pretty much. Just your average week, right? Megan laughed, then winced, holding her head. God, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. How long was I gone? Only a couple of days, Sarah replied, pushing a mug of coffee towards her friend. But I'm sure being trapped in some kind of shadow dimension isn't great for the body. As they sipped their coffee, a comfortable silence fell between them. Sarah found her thoughts drifting to Elizabeth, wondering what had become of the ghost who had helped them so much. I hope she found peace, Sarah mused. After centuries of being trapped here, she deserves it. So what now? Megan asked, breaking Sarah out of her reverie. Sarah sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, how do you go back to normal life after something like this? Megan reached across the table, squeezing Sarah's hand. Together, she said firmly. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Warmth bloomed in Sarah's chest at her friend's words. She had come to this house feeling lost and alone, but now I have a best friend who literally went to hell and back for me, Sarah thought with a smile. Asterisk and maybe I'm stronger than I